world feels a bit toxic and blah these days, doesn't it? The same old people coming up with the same old solutions for big problems that still don't work. We need to change the game. Well, welcome to Women Advancing. Join me, host Kate Byrne, in this dynamic bi-weekly podcast, bringing together female founders, funders, and thought leaders. Listen to the people driving change, how they got there, how you can help, and yep, how you might just be the next one to advance. Proof that all ships rise with women at the helm. That's what happens when Women Advance with Kate Byrne. Our guest today is Jacquelyn Lane, president and co-founder of 100 Coaches Agency. She's the co-author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Becoming Coachable, and doing all of this just shy of her 30th birthday and making it on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Extraordinary insights with regards to what some of the challenges that women are facing, some of the aspects of being a leader, of shortfalls and practices that we women need to work on, namely learning how to manage up versus just the managing down, and overcoming this notion that my good work is going to speak for itself, because sadly, that isn't enough. And she also shares some of her special insights on who gets her excited and how she moves forward and what fuels her next ideas. And she's going to be writing a second book. So more to come. But listen in. You'll learn a lot. I've just got to say, you've been a busy bee, miss. Thank you so much for making the time to squeeze us in.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Kate. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Well, one of the things that you and I have been talking a bit about, and it comes up so often, I'm sure, when you're talking with clients and when I'm talking with others, is this whole notion of our leadership journey and our career. And some think it's such a straight path. Others of us have had more of a wending path. Share a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
I love these stories. Our origin stories are so powerful. For me, I guess my leadership journey began in corporate America. And I think, like many people, I actually experienced what I would describe as poor leadership. And it was some of that example that showed me maybe not what I wanted to be, but what I didn't want to be. Now, certainly I worked with some great leaders as well. But more often than not, I saw the challenges of not having a clear strategy or of poor communication or an unhealthy culture. And I knew that and believed that there could be better. And so it's what set me off on my journey to ultimately found the 100 Coaches Agency with my business partner, Scott Osmond, because we believed that there can be a better way and that leadership can be learned, it can be taught. And one of the best ways to do that is with the support of an executive coach. But of course, we also, in a business that promotes learning and growth and development and leadership, we have to live that too. And so that was the thing that we really learned and started to lean into and say, how can we build a healthy, flourishing culture, even within our organization? And for me, I'm, as you said, it's no surprise, 30 under 30, so I'm just shy of my 30th birthday. So relatively young, but I've also never had the experience of working for a woman before. So in many ways, I was charting my own path and trying to decide how can I show up authentically and genuinely as myself, as a young person and as a woman, with that care and concern that I naturally have for people, while also having vision and clear communication. And so fortunately, I've had some wonderful mentors, friends, and coaches along the way who've really supported me, and whom I owe being here today.
So, and thank you for sharing that. And we'll get into a little bit deeper, that piece about never having really worked for a woman. I've worked for some great ones. I've worked similarly for some that have some growth to do. So it'll be fun to dive into that a little bit. But what were some of the skills that you relied on early on in your career while you were, managing and navigating through corporate America? And then I'd love to also know, when and how did you get the courage to say, okay, this is it. I'm going out on my own.
Yeah. Well, I'm an engineer by training.
Mm,
And let's just be clear, they don't give a
that's
lot of leadership
hilarious.
training in engineering school. So, of course, a lot of the skills that I relied heavily upon early in my career are ultimately not the skills that I have had to learn and now use today as in the leadership role. Of course, very analytical at a time. And it was really interesting. I learned quickly in corporate America that being an individual contributor, in my own work was not going to be enough to accomplish the things that we needed to accomplish. So much of education, including engineering school, teaches you to be a strong individual, that there's not a lot of teamwork. Uh, and so those were some of the skills I had to learn quickly because, of course, education and the working world are not actually aligned in this way. So I quickly in corporate America became the person known to just aggregate interesting people together. I was the person who probably had one coffee meeting a day with someone at a different part of the company or part of the business. And so I'd learn about all these interesting projects and solutions that people had. And I would bring some of those different people together to solve some of the challenges we were having in my business unit. And so it turns out I learned that that's one of the things I love doing. I love bringing interesting people together. And really, that's a type of leadership. And so that was, I guess, what started me on this journey. And as we know from our dear friend Marshall Goldsmith, what got us here won't get us there.
It's there.
So new skills had to be learned along the way.
So, what's really interesting? One skill that I can think of that would transfer over from being an engineer is this notion of a critical path. And,
Mm,
sort of where you understand, okay, for me to get there, I need this, this, and this. Then realizing, which you have this gift of, oh, hey, I'm missing these three ingredients, these skill sets, these pieces, and or these departments have to come in. So then having I'm going to say humility to have curiosity and realizing, hey, I can't go it alone, beautifully positions you and for just the future and the way the future is sort of more flatter, less hierarchical organizations are moving into, especially now that we've got, what is it, 5, 6 different generations at any given time and how they respond to power and communication. Are those some of the topics that you actually cover in what the core principles of 100 coaches?
yeah, that you're so spot on, Kate. Those are some of the things that many executives struggle with. And I think one of the things I hear is that everyone is struggling with something or another. There are all areas where we have blind spots and missing pieces to the puzzle. But I think in general, people feel tired or burned out. Many leaders feel like they're communicating sufficiently, but their teams feel like they're not communicating sufficiently. Some people don't make peace with power dynamics and the fact that the decision maker makes the decision. And so these are some of the things where you have to shine a light, help people come to accept reality, commit to, as you said, the humility to play the long game, to recognize that we all have growth areas. And a great leader today is often someone who says, I need help, rather than saying they need to have all the answers.
I was given by a dear friend, gave me this lovely, that sort of, for lack of a better term, parable. And it's a book called The Boy, the Mole, the
Oh,
Fox, and the Horse.
I love that book.
And there's a line in there that talks about asking for help is not quitting, it's refusing to give up. And I thought, if we all sort of looked at things, looked at it that way, there would be no sort of self-judgment. And one would be encouraged to just ask whatever they needed and not doubt at all. Well, so how does this new sort of chapter, I would say, of leadership, what kinds of opportunities does that hold for women? Like, are there certain, I know we all are yin and yang and everyone has masculine and feminine, but what are some of the things that you're sort of seeing and excited about for the future for women in this realm?
At the 100 Coaches Agency, around half or just over half of the leaders that we coach are women, which to me is really, really exciting.
Yes.
Companies are significantly investing in the growth and advancement of their women. They recognize that there has been inequity historically in women being represented in leadership roles, and many companies are committed to closing that gap.
What does it mean to be a leader and a woman?
Well, certainly it's a balancing act to be
Yeah.
both a woman and a leader. And I find that many women feel that tension of wanting to be kind and caring, but also be known as being firm and assertive. And many of them want to be mothers in addition to working. And so there's a balancing act that happens there naturally. And I think in general, I find that a lot of women have some fear because again, they're really writing this new story. They don't have nearly the examples and the generational experience uh, to to really walk this path. And so I find, of course, like playing, it's easy to pull from old playbooks what we saw from many of our moms or grandmothers. That's a known path. And so it
Right.
feels very safe in many ways. But charting a new course is really scary. And of course, they need great support along the way. I find that many women are excellent at managing down and caring for their teams and people well. They consistently, from what I hear within companies, get top marks regarding their management skills, and people enjoy working for them. Speaking in relatively broad strokes, it's not true for everyone, but that it seems to be a big trend. But I'll say that I observe them to not be so good at managing up. They don't often advocate for themselves in the same way that many of their male counterparts feel comfortable advocating for themselves. So it is something to be aware of and really to focus on.
Jacquelyn, why is that?
Uh, I
I
think
am one of those people. So I catch
that,
myself, or historically I was. I finally this year I'm finding I'm getting a little bit more into it. But is it is it literally old habits, old beliefs that are coming from our family that automatically those tapes start clicking into us so that we start listening to that instead of our heart?
I think there are certainly some habits that we pick up early in our lives. And I think one of those is my good work will be recognized and rewarded. And it's that same myth, if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears about it, did it really fall? And unfortunately, a lot of corporate America is people are very busy and very distracted. And unless a manager is paying very close attention, no, they will probably not spontaneously observe your good work and recognize you for it. Unfortunately, advocating for oneself is a really essential skill. There's one of my favorite books is from Sally Helgeson, who is also a member of the 100 Coaches community. And her book, How Women Rise, which she wrote with our friend Marshall Goldsmith, is a fantastic guide to some of the habits that women often exhibit without even recognizing that they're doing it because it's just such an ingrained pattern at this point in our lives. I'll say that one of the ways around it is to have incredibly aware male leaders who can start to recognize some of those habits as well. And I feel very fortunate that my business partner, Scott, is one of those and has helped me really learn, grow, and be better in this area.
That's a really great point, is to get a male counterpart, partner in crime,
Mhm.
coach, if you will, but literally sort of an advocate to help you advocate with yourself, let alone with other people, and kind of help you, balance and counter some of those demon conversations that take place. Well, I think too, one of the things that we've been talking a bit about too is our fear or our past beliefs of, well, women are more the poets, right? They're more the communicators, the marketing, all of that, the feel good, to your point, HR.
Yes.
God forbid, right? So God forbid I get involved with anything that a quant would do. I don't, numbers, I can't do math. Yeah, you can. You wouldn't get to where you are if you couldn't. So, talk a little bit about that, because That's a key piece, it seems to me. If you can move that rock aside, your little ascension will really begin to flow.
Yeah. One of the things that I hear so clearly is in order to make it to the very top of an organization, the C-suite or CEO position, you really have to have managed a P&L before. It's just the rules of the road. And I remember I was speaking at a women's conference, and one of the questions that was submitted was, "Oh, how can we change the game in order to make advance to the coveted CEO position?" And I just laughed and I said, the game is the game. I don't think we're going to be changing the game. It's about learning to play the game. Once you know the rules and you understand how to get there, then listen, you have to take the bold moves, play the game, and see what happens. Uh, and really, I would encourage women, don't be afraid to take on those roles. Do something in the field of sales or finance or engineering and manage a business unit, manage a plant. I know that there are fewer women who've held those roles historically, but representation matters. And this is not just about ourselves, but about the generation that follows us as well.
Definitely setting the road set up for them and the path set up for them by all means. I also think that, and this is going to touch upon the comment that you brought in earlier, you've never been led by a woman.
Never.
Yeah. Now, as once been was told me, in order to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower. So you get used to, following, and that doesn't mean one learns the hard way. It doesn't mean saying yes all the time, but it's kind of that whole notion of the decision maker makes a decision. How can people bite their tongue when they really want to speak out against that is the stupidest decision I've ever heard? Because that can be career, especially when it's a woman who is making the decision. You want to be supportive, and at the same time, you disagree. How can one disagree respectfully?
Oh, this is a great question. I like to use Jeff Bezos's framework here just to kind of quickly delineate between the types of decisions that can be made. He talks about reversible decisions and irreversible decisions. And of course, as it makes sense, reversible decisions are the ones that you can change. So you're in many ways incentivized to make a decision quickly, go down, pursue that path, and know that you can always change your mind or backtrack if needed. And then there are irreversible decisions, ones that are quite consequential. If you're signing a contract for 5 years or 10 years to do something, that would be very hard to back off. And so you want to really be thoughtful and take the time to do the analysis before you commit to that decision. And so I find that in situations of reversible decisions, sometimes saying, well, here's my opinion, but I'm happy to disagree and commit is a great perspective, because then, again, you're telling people what you think, but in a respectful way, and saying, I can be a team player here. But on the irreversible decisions, that's where I find having the courage to speak up and say, hey, my instinct is this, and even better, I can back it up with this analysis or this data. That becomes a really powerful thing. And if worst absolutely comes to worst, my experience is find a male counterpart who shares the same opinion and have them voice it.
Oh, that's frustrating. But I think you're right. I would think that if you're fortunate enough, that male counterpart may be willing to say, I was speaking with Jacquelyn, and she brought up a really good point, Jacquelyn, and step away and give that's a big ask, I know. And there aren't a lot of women necessarily, sadly, that would do that either. But I think if we can start kind of exhibiting that kind of behavior, it would literally making room for others to take the mic, just pass it on down the road.
I couldn't agree more. But I do find there's strength in numbers. And so even, whether that person is another man within the organization or another woman, finding someone else who shares your view and winning them over and together speaking up is much more powerful than and less scary than having to stand there and say it alone.
Well, yeah, there's nothing worse when you are that voice and someone has said, "Oh, sure, I'll stand up, I'll stand up beside you," and they don't, and it's kind of crickets. Then that is always going to be a potential situation. What are some of the trickiest pieces that you discuss with some of your clients, the women? Is it, around feedback, imposter syndrome, some of these, essentially, what are some of the biggest challenges that people seem to be coming to you with in these current days?
Oh,
Where to
oh,
begin?
yeah, where to begin? Of course, every person's a little different. And so for some women, it's having the work-life balance. It's the pressures of home combined with the pressures of work. And letting go of some of the guilt that they feel both as a parent and as an employee. And that tension is a tough one. Again, coaching can be great for finding some peace and resolution there. Of course, communication is always one of those challenges. How do I communicate with strength without being perceived as bossy or pushy? That's a tough line to walk. I think in general, courage and boldness to take those big career moves is often a challenge. You don't want to make that career-ending move. And many women don't have a safe space or a sounding board that they can meet with. I think feedback, as you mentioned, is another one of those challenges. Some women do feel some people in general feel
Yeah,
very
I
defensive
agree.
about hearing feedback. And it's a bit of a process to work through that. How do you hear when someone tells you something to really see it as a gift and just say thank you? Recognizing that they are telling you something valuable, even if you don't think it's totally warranted. And of course, as you mentioned, imposter syndrome is really the theme that goes through all of those different topics. It's that I'm not really sure, and I don't know how to take the next step alone.
And because one doesn't know how to take the next step alone, all the more reason for the feedback, because feedback is essentially directional guidance. You're
Absolutely.
heading north, but you wanted to go south. So I'm telling you, you're heading north and you want to take a left turn at the next spot. So
Absolutely. It's one of those essential leadership skills. And the truth is that as we rise through an organization, we often hear feedback less and less and less.
uh,
So because of real and perceived power dynamics. And so the openness to hear it is essential because we all know so many leaders that behind their back, their employees and teams are saying one thing about them, but they're too afraid to say it to this person's face. And they end up wondering why they're not progressing in their career. Everyone else in the organization knows it. It's just that they don't.
Jacquelyn, this is such an important point because especially in the beginning to your comment, you may not want to know, but the fact that you have an inkling that there's something that you need to know, you do know. And so you need to one looks to others for verification of it. And sure, the truth hurts sometimes, but it's going to hurt a heck of a lot more, to your point, about not rising up through the channels. And it may seem smart to like, how do you coach people who have sort of surrounded themselves we talk about a personal board of directors, but with those who are all proponents of everything you're doing is puppy dogs and unicorns and cupcakes.
Uh, well, I feel for me, I had to get to the point where I was more afraid of not knowing where I stand than of knowing the truth. So more afraid of not hearing than of hearing, because hearing is scary, no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah.
But you're right. It's just kicking the can down the road. And it takes, especially if you have the perception of being someone who receives feedback poorly, gets defensive, etc. It is a long road to unwind some of those perceptions. And you're right. You need to have the people around you who will shoot you straight. And the truth is, you have to ask over and over and over and over again. I find that a trusted peer is one of the best people because there's often not that same power dynamic at play. A great manager is also someone who should tell you the truth. But it's often very difficult to get the people you lead to tell you the hard feedback and the truth. So that takes a lot more time, but I would start with peers and leader, your manager before.
Before
Yeah,
going big and
you gotta
giving them
start
a hound.
somewhere. Get that feedback muscle exercising again.
Yeah. So, and that's a really interesting point too. The key piece is being defensive. How can we help people? Like, what is a non-defensive response? Because I think sometimes there are people who don't see that, talk about a blind spot. They're saying, great, I want to hear the feedback. And then you say it, and then they say, no, that's not true. I don't think that's right. And then they say, don't be defensive. And one says, yes, this is me I'm referring to. Very, very glass house, but I'm not being defensive. How, what does that sound like? How do we, how do we language that?
So this is an insight from Marshall that the only appropriate response to any feedback
Oh,
is thank you. That's it. And it's not even thank you, that's great. Because if the first piece of feedback gives you, you say thank you, that's great. The next piece you say, thanks, I'll think about it. And the third piece of feedback you say, thanks, or I'm not sure, or anything. All of a sudden, you've graded the feedback. You said, I really loved what the first thing you said. I was okay with the second thing, and I was uncomfortable with the third thing. And if you grade that feedback, again, even just something that subtle, but especially if it comes from someone that you lead, that is going to deter them from telling you what you don't want to hear. And
right,
ultimately, feedback, whether it's what you want to hear or don't want to hear, is for our benefit.
right,
So,
right.
so just thank you, even though it's a really, really, it might feel a little awkward because we always feel some need to interject, but
Light.
you have to, I mean, this is one of those things I have had to really learn to bite my tongue over and over and over again.
It is, I have a very short tongue because I've nibbled and nibbled and nibbled, unfortunately. So, so through all this, what are some of the things that you do personally to continue to grow and develop as a leader? Are there practices or philosophies or habits that you found are the most helpful for yourself?
Oh, well, I love being in the field of leadership development and executive coaching because it's the industry of learning.
Yeah.
And as someone who works in this space, I feel so fortunate. One of the perks of the job is so much learning and growth. I think I might be the candidate for most free coaching ever received, because working with so many coaches, they never quite turn off the coaching. And so I end up receiving a lot of really great input from them. I love reading business books in general, and feel very fortunate in our community to know a lot of authors who are coming out with really groundbreaking research and getting to further discuss those ideas live with them. I love podcasts in general. And I feel like it's just kind of the water I'm swimming in right now.
Well, yeah. So I just recently learned of some work that UVA is doing, and I'm sure others are doing it as well. And that's University of Virginia around the alpha gal syndrome, which I'm going to be having them on join us on the show in a little bit later. But what are some of the research pieces that you find the most intriguing right now? Or have you going,
Ooh, that's a good question. One thing that I've really, well, so I love again Sally Helgeson's book, How Women Rise. I
right,
think is a fantastic, fantastic and well-researched book. I also really loved The Myth of the Nice Girl. I can't remember the author's name right now. It's just escaping me. But I found that to be a very powerful story about how you can both be kind and be a good leader. I also just watched the Frances Hesselbein documentary, Defining Moments. And I'm sure if you know Frances Hesselbein,
yes,
she is one of the great leaders of the last century. And one of her famous quotes is, "I'm not a woman leader, I'm a leader, period."
Yeah.
There's no need to qualify that. And she, of course, led the Girl Scouts I think it was, she was the CEO of the Girl Scouts in the late 70s and into the 80s, and transformed that organization from being largely a housekeeping skills and homemaking
Right. Home ec. Yep.
to being the entrepreneurial, STEM-focused, leadership-focused organization that it is for women today. And she had a huge emphasis on diversity and inclusion in the 80s, when that was not nearly as popular a subject as it is today. And so I love the example of Frances.
Great one.
Yeah.
That's
And I
a
think,
terrific one. Yeah.
and who was it that wrote about growth mindset versus fixed mindset? Remind me.
I'm trying to think of who that
Is it Carol Dweck?
Yes. Yes. Carol Dweck from
Yes.
CBA. Yes.
Yes. Perfect. So, and that's the other one that I love, of course, is that it says our growth is up to us, that we can choose to have this growth mindset. I can learn, grow, do better, versus I'm fixed and all my traits are just inborn in me and people will just have to work around the person I am. And then I combine that idea with Dory Clark's The Long Game, right? We're
Yeah.
not playing the short game. We're not playing for the quarter. We're playing for years, for decades, and even if we take that even further, for centuries. How can we make decisions with our children and our children's children in mind? And if I combine growth mindset with long game, that to me feels like my philosophy at the moment.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I wish that more people in the financial realm, when they're investing, would think that way too.
As do I.
That's another podcast for another time. But that's one of the biggest issues, right? Is short-term results versus long-term. And if we had that whole notion, which it just speaks to Frances's acumen as a business person, that she understood that people, planet, profit, and those people, you want the broadest swath involved. It's not nice. Sure, it's nice, but it's smart. It's just smart business. And that's what really fuels your diversity, it fuels your sustainability.
Absolutely.
And you keep getting generations and generations of next gen. Well, so your book, speaking of all these people and these fabulous researchers and these people have written a book, how did you know and how did you get the courage to write a book? That's no small undertaking. So many people say I'm going to write a book as if it's the easiest thing. And it is not. It's certainly not to write a good one. So how'd you get there? Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Wow. It was like, for many people, writing a book was always a dream. And like many people, I also just didn't know when it was going to happen until I found the right collaborators. So it was when Scott and I had an idea for a book for a long time, but we discussed it in a few different places. We were pretty open about wanting to pursue this, but didn't really know how to get started. And then we met our publisher, Naren at Amplify Publishing, and he said, said definitively, this is a book and I think this can be a bestseller. And he caught the vision just from the title, Becoming Coachable. He caught the vision and said, we are going to make this happen. And that partnership was the wind in our sails that got us started on this process. Of course, we also learned from Marshall Goldsmith, who became our third co-author, and he has written many books and so has a lot of experience in this space. And that was also very valuable. But then I think one of the most important pieces that goes somewhat hidden is our friend and coach, Nilofer Merchant. And Nilofer, she wrote a fantastic book called The Power of Onlyness, which talks about the unique place that each person stands in the world to make a difference. And it's a fabulous book, and I love her writing style. But we had hired Nilofer to be our coach for Scott and I at the agency. And she had just the right input at the right time and said, I think this is a great book, but you need a good outline. And so she helped us build the scaffolding for the book. Basically, what are going to be the chapters or the sections of the book? What are some of the subheadings that will come in each of those chapters? And once it was outlined well and we had talked through it, I knew at that moment that we were going to write this book. And
You
and
saw
then
it.
we filled, Scott and I were and Marshall were able to fill in all that scaffolding. Once we knew the direction, this very unified voice and collaborative writing effort just poured out of us, and we wrote the book very quickly. So I would say the right partnership, and also if you're a first-time author, it's very intimidating to look at a blank Word document and to see a book on a blank out of a blank page. And so sometimes just building the structure is enough to get started on filling it in.
That makes sense. That's amazing. Well, again, seriously, congratulations on that. Now, do you think you'll end up writing another?
We are currently beginning our work on the second book.
All
It'll
right.
probably be a few years. It's going to be a more research intensive book, but we're very excited for it.
Oh, that's terrific. I won't press. I will wait till later, and then you can be back on the show when that comes out, which will be
Thanks.
terrific. So with you and Scott, looking or just moving forward, what's the vision for 100 coaches? Do you plan to expand or evolve or the organization's overall impact? What are your
Yeah,
dreams there?
I mean, our ambition is to create human flourishing in the world through leadership. There are a few people in the world who have a disproportionate impact. We call those people leaders.
Yeah.
And those are the people that we want to work with, the most impactful leaders who are at moments of inflection in their work and their lives. We want to pair them with the right coaching support at just the right time so that they can make an outsized impact and create human flourishing for themselves, their teams, their employees, their client, their suppliers, their customers, the environment. And if we and really leadership is the vehicle to do that. So we've already it's amazing. We've already impacted millions of people through our work at the agency, because we're working with these incredibly influential leaders. And it might sound a little audacious, but the hope is really to reach 1 billion people through improved leadership.
Fantastic. I think be audacious. We need audacious things right now. There's going to be a lot of hubbub in the coming years, and I think that kind of audacity is very welcome with open arms. So,
Thanks.
knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self? You're not that old, but still, there's always stuff that you know what I mean?
Yeah. Ooh. I think this goes back to this idea of playing the long game. I would encourage people to take that kind of long-term perspective and be patient. Good things take time. And it also takes a community of people. And really, at the end of the day, anything meaningful that we accomplish is with and for other people. Uh, so don't forget to cultivate those relationships. Stepping on someone now to get ahead is not a great long-term strategy that was likely to come back to bite you. So collect the right people, play the long game.
I was just going to ask if you could distill everything you've learned into one essential lesson for today's leaders, what would it be? You pretty much just stated it. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Jacquelyn, I could talk with you for hours. And I'd love to dig into some of that research and some of those things, and maybe even have a conversation around Frances, just because she's so spectacular. So this will not be the first of our many conversations, but I want to thank you so much on behalf of Women Advancing and all the listeners for doing all the work that you're doing. Continue to do, and thank the Lord you're playing the long game, because you'll be around for a really long time.
Thanks, Kate. It's such an honor to be with you, to get to chat about all these important topics. Again, I'm really looking forward to more conversations. Thank you for this important message. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to call you a friend.
Thank you. Same here. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, how's the best way?
The best way to find me is on LinkedIn. Jacquelyn Lane is my profile. You can go to the 100 Coaches Agency page and find me there. You can also go to our website, 100coaches.com, to learn more. And of course, don't hesitate to reach out. I hope to hear from people.
Terrific. Well, listen, thanks again.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here.
Thanks for listening. May this episode inspire you to move forward. Be sure to go to iTunes, Spotify, katebyrne.co, that's KATEBYRNE.co, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to even more episodes. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. And be sure to meet them on the next Women Advancing. Ta till next time.